Hello everyone, I'm Megan Schwartz, and welcome back to another episode of Ben Talks About. Now, this is going to be a sort of quote-unquote follow-up to one of the videos that I had done previously quite a while ago about one of the more recent Nintendo Directs that Nintendo had on their channel, and it's covering two very specific remakes of games that I've been wanting to play for quite a long time now. Well, one more so in particular than the other, and that is this right here, the Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, as well as the remastered version of Metroid Prime. Both these games are HD remakes of games that came out previously, this one being, of course, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, which was originally for the Nintendo Wii, and this one being a remaster of Metroid Prime, which was released originally for the Nintendo GameCube. I decided to cover both of these games in one video, mostly because they have the same sort of idea. They're both remakes of previously established games, so it's not necessarily something that's overly new per se, but also at the same time, there are two games that I have quite a few things to talk about, and I prefer just to have them all put down in more so in just one big sort of video. So I'm going to first go ahead and talk about this one right here, Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which of course is a remake of the original Kirby's Return to Dreamland on the Wii, which was a game that I had wanted to play for the longest time now. I'd seen people do many reviews and Let's Plays of the game, and it was always the Kirby game that I just could never find at a good price, because by the time I realized that I was able to actually get it, by that time the Wii had more or less been completely discontinued, and you could go into a game store and never be able to find it. So I was either having to forced to pay for it secondhand, or eventually wait for them to release it as an HD variation, which is what I have right here, so thank God for that. But yeah, this game was essentially released as a sort of return to Kirby's sort of roots in 2D platforming, because prior to this, a lot of the other Kirby games that were released on the time, but at that time, especially the handheld ones, were games that were not necessarily the traditional style of Kirby, and this game, when it was released on the Wii, was essentially a return to form. It's essentially what Nintendo did when they released New Super Mario Bros. Wii and Donkey Kong Country Returns, which, ironically, both of them were also Wii titles. So I feel like the game does that very well on this system as well, although the game plays more so traditionally like a traditional 2D side-scroller type of Kirby, since the previous game we got was Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which was a fully 3D title, so it does feel very nice being able to play a Kirby game like this. Of course, they also have Kirby, of course, has his traditional copy abilities, as well as the new ones that were introduced in this game as well, and but it's not like the game is just a HD remaster of the exact same Wii game. They do have a few key differences. One of the differences that you can see right here on the front of the case here is actually the sort of newer kind of art style that the characters have, especially compared to the original. And parts of it I'm completely fine with. I think that the art style can sometimes work very well, but other time the way they look, they made certain characters look just don't feel right exactly. I'm mostly concerned. One of the main things that you notice from the art style, and you can also tell about this during the game itself, is that all the characters now have these very thick outlines all around their bodies. I guess it's so that they can more so stand out from whatever backdrops they have when going through the stage, which is not necessarily something that I mind per se. I didn't really find it to be that much of a hindrance in terms of the art style, because the game itself still looks really, really good. It doesn't necessarily look like it was originally released on the Wii. It has the game looks very pretty to look at, and if it was released and marketed it as a brand new 2D Kirby game, I feel like most people wouldn't bat an eye that this would end up actually being a HD version of what was previously a Wii title, But one of the major things that I noticed is that the art style for the characters, aside from Kirby, do look a lot different. Mostly concerning these two right here, King Dedede and Meta Knight. And while Meta Knight's more thin-looking visor looks a lot more, it doesn't look too noticeable. The fact that they essentially, when you look at King Dedede right here, it looks like they just took his face and just shrunk it down slightly, but kept the rest of his body proportions the exact same, and that just looks really, really off-putting, because I feel like I've been so used to the way King Dedede traditionally looks, especially after recently playing Kirby's Triple Deluxe on the 3DS. The way that they made him look here in this new version is very much odd. But it's not necessarily something that you'll notice too much, especially if you're just playing single player rather than the multiplayer. Also, please excuse Jack for being in the camera angle there. But yeah, of course, one of the main things that people remember from this game is the introduction of the co-op multiplayer, similar to what New Super Mario Bros. Wii does, where 4 players are able to play through the whole stage at the exact same time. I hadn't exactly experimented on that yet, but it feels like the level design is simple enough, and the gameplay itself is way more simpler compared to New Super Mario Bros. That I don't feel like having all 4 players on the screen at the same time is really that much of a chaotic mess as it can be with 4-player games like this. I feel like the level design is simple enough so that all the players are able to go through very smoothly, while at the same time it's not like you're necessarily losing anything by only going through single player. The game seems to be more simple, that it can be played with a person by yourself or with other players as well. Of course, if you look at the back of the box right here, you can actually see that they did add a lot more in terms of gameplay to this title right here. The game most prominently and most marketed was the introduction of a new epilogue series of events where you take control of who was the game's original main villain throughout the original campaign, and you essentially play as them and help them try to regain their powers. Not quite sure what exactly the motive is behind that, considering you are playing as a villain for that part of the game. I haven't gotten far enough to experience that area yet, because you have to beat the game in order to unlock that new area. But from the gameplay that I have seen of it, it looks like it's it looks like it has the same sort of feel as it is when you're traditionally just playing as Kirby, but you're just playing as a new character. Another thing that they do have, which I managed to experience, was this area right here, and this part of the game is essentially a compilation of all the different mini games that Kirby's had for quite a while. I noticed that a lot of the mini games from Kirby Superstar and the Super Nintendo actually appeared in this, and they essentially play the exact same way as they did in their original forms, but of course with the new art style and these 3D models that they have in this title right here. Overall, I feel like this game, in terms of fun factor, is definitely a lot of fun. I don't really feel like there's really a way to make a Kirby game necessarily a bad one per se. I feel like he has a very good track record with having games that are decent, if not really good. And I feel like this game is very much a prime example of it, because the original Wii game was already solid enough as it is, but now we have this new version, so that people who maybe didn't originally own a Wii or didn't really get the game when it first came out on the Wii, they're able to experience this title here. So if you are indeed a fan of Kirby, I would most definitely recommend getting this title here. This game is still relatively new. It came out only like a few months ago, I think. So you may as well go ahead and pick it up while you still can, because who knows, considering how rare certain video games can get once they reach a certain age, it's only a matter of time before certain other titles become more expensive as well. With that in mind, let me go ahead and talk about our next game on the list right here, Metroid Prime Remastered, which of course is a remastered version of the original GameCube title, which I actually had played quite a lot of. In fact, I was actually on the verge of beating that original game until the final boss made me really not want to play the game that much anymore. But eventually, once I heard that this game was being announced, I got pretty excited because a lot of the stuff they announced about the game felt like something that would be something that me, as well as a lot of people who are fans of the original GameCube game, would look forward to seeing. So in terms of overall gameplay, it is essentially a more or less one-to-one translation of the original GameCube title. You're still going through the same exact areas, all in the first-person perspective that Metroid Prime introduced to the Metroid series, and I feel like the overall gameplay of it is really, really fun, especially this version on its own, because they actually fixed, well, quote-unquote fixed, it's not necessarily a huge detriment, but it's something that I find very much appealing, is the fact that they made it so that you can play it with traditional first-person style controls, where the right analog stick actually controls the camera where you're actually controls where you're looking, rather than the original game, where in the original the left analog stick controlled where you were pointed at, as well as when you moved. So in order to actually turn the camera around all sorts of ways, you actually had to hold one of the shoulder buttons in order to turn the camera, meaning that you weren't able to necessarily run and gun super quickly and as comfortably. And I feel like this version fixes that sort of issue. However, one thing that I do like about this is that it gives you the option to play with the original control scheme, and I believe it also allows you to play with the same sort of motion controls that was given to when they re-released Metroid Prime 1 on the Wii as part of the Metroid Prime trilogy that they had released. So yeah, it gives you have a lot of variety in terms of how you want to play the game. I personally just play with the traditional regular first-person controls, because that's the kind of control scheme I'm used to when it comes to first-person shooters, and I feel like the game translates very well even with the changed control scheme. I feel like it allows you to be a lot more precise and a lot more faster with, running and gunning through the areas and all that. The game itself looks very, very, very good. The graphics are probably some of the best that the Nintendo Switch has given us, to be perfectly honest, which is pretty fair, because the original GameCube release of Metroid Prime was probably one of the best looking games on the GameCube when it first released, and I feel like this game does it very much justice. There are times where it feels like the lighting can be a little bit too dark at times, and it makes it somewhat confusing on where to go, and I feel like there's a lot of mechanics that were kind of confusing to go through, especially when it comes to navigating using the map. But I feel like that sort of comes with the fact that this was the first time Metroid tried to do something first person, and not too many super explorative first person shooters were really out there at the time. So it's not necessarily something that you can really blame the game on, and it's something that you sort of get used to over time. There is some extra content in the game, but it is very, very cosmetic and sort of minimalistic. Mostly it being in the extras menu of the title screen, which gives you 3D renders of all the different enemies that you fight and all the different power-ups you can obtain throughout the game, which is cool and all, but one of the things that was cool about the original GameCube game was the fact that you were able to get stuff like the original Metroid game for the NES, I believe, was playable in that way, and you also were able to unlock the Fusion Suit if you connected it with a copy of Metroid Fusion using the little GameCube Game Boy Advance adapter that they had released. But those were completely removed. I kind of understand why, considering, Nintendo more or less wants nothing to do with the Game Boy Advance, if we're being perfectly honest nowadays. But I feel like that could have been something that would have been nice for them to keep, because it might have been just an aesthetic thing, but being able to play through the game with the Fusion Suit on was cool, because it was something that you wouldn't expect for them to have, and it would have been nice if they gave us some sort of way to activate that on a whim in this title. But it's not necessarily something that really degrades the game, and the game itself is still very, very, very well done. If you have already played the original GameCube version of Prime but have not invested in this one yet, I would highly recommend getting this one. It is it's a very well put together Metroid game, and is a very good remaster of a game that I feel like people have been wanting for quite a while now. Here's hoping we do get HD versions of Prime 2 and Prime 3, because I feel like if this game does well enough, them releasing the other two games would probably be an inevitability at this point. So yeah, this game right here, as well as this one right here, I'd say both of these I would highly recommend both of these games, and you would most definitely want to add them to your Nintendo Switch collection. So yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and get those games right there out of the way, because I've been wanting to talk about these for a while now, ever since I first got them. And I hope you all enjoyed me talking about these two titles right here. I am sort of late to the party, considering these games have been out for quite a while now, but as per tradition with the channel, I more or less talk about things that a majority of people aren't talking about anymore, in terms of what people are going for on the internet, mostly because of the fact that I simply feel like doing it. So I hope you all enjoyed this video here. So until next time, I'm Ben Contreras, and bye.